So the topic that I'm going to present today is called Automating Linux Malware Analysis using Limon Sandbox. As the name says, the focus would be on the Linux malware and analyzing the Linux malware. So before I move on, let me introduce myself. My name is Monappa. I work with Cisco's incident response team, where I focus on threat intelligence and investigation of advanced cyber attacks. Basically, we focus on the APT investigations and research on the APT attacks. So my fields of interest are reverse engineering, malware analysis, and memory forensics. I'm also a member of a security research community called Security Exploded. Okay, so this is where you can follow me. So this is the Twitter and my blog where you can follow me, and this is an email account in case you don't have enough time for questions. You can feel free to send me an email. I would be happy to answer your questions. So this is what I'm going to cover today. So we're going to talk about what is malware. So probably you already know what malware is. So then I'm going to talk about what malware analysis is, why malware analysis is essential, and then I'm going to talk about 3 different types of analysis, and then I'll show you how these 3 types of analysis can be automated using a tool called Limon, and then I'm going to demonstrate I'm going to show you 3 video demos of real world Linux malware samples. So till the demo, I'll be covering. I'll take like 20 minutes till the demo, and after that, around 35 to 40 minutes, I'm going to show you the analysis of those malware samples. Okay, so what is malware? I'm going to quickly skim over this slide. So what is malware? The code that is malicious. It can get into your system without your consent, so it can come in via spear phishing email, or it can come in via watering hole attack or drive-by downloads. So what they do, they normally disrupt your computer operation. They steal sensitive information from your system. They can allow attackers access to the system. Like in case of APT malwares, the APT actors use RAT programs, which is remote access trojans, which allow attackers access to the system, after which they can hop into other systems and then find the data of interest and exfiltrate the data out of the network. And it can spy on systems. So these are some of the things that the malware does. Okay, so what is malware analysis and why malware analysis? So malware analysis, to put it in simple terms, it's the study of the malware behavior. So it's basically to understand the characteristics of the malware, how to detect and eliminate it. So why malware analysis? Basically to answer a lot of questions. So when an organization is infected with malware, you want to answer questions like, how did it get into your system? Is it spreading to other systems? How long it's been there? Who is behind us? And those kind of stuff. So in order to answer questions, the malware analysis helps. And also you want to understand the functionality of the malware and the nature and the purpose of the malware. You want to understand if a malware is an HTTP bot, is it taking commands from an IRC channel, is it logging keystrokes, is it stealing sensitive information, and so on. So that's where malware analysis helps. And also from an incident response perspective, you want to determine the network and the host-based indicators. You want to determine if a malware is connecting to a command and control server, what command and control server it is connecting to, or is it taking commands and doing something, or is it downloading additional components, or is it doing a lateral movement or exfiltrating data out of the network. So that's where the malware analysis helps. And also you might also want to determine the host-based indicators. You want to see if a malware is logging a keystrokes, where is it logging? Is it logging to a file, or is it creating additional process? Is it creating mutex, and so on? These are some of the things. To answer these questions, the malware analysis helps. And also, after you determine the network indicators and the host-based indicators, we call it the indicators of compromise, you can add this to your security devices to determine additional infections. Okay, so why focus on Linux malware analysis? Because Linux is growing in its popularity, and also there are a lot of devices use Linux. The servers that serve the web content use Linux. The mainframe computers, the supercomputers use Linux, and also Linux runs on embedded systems. The smartphones, the Android runs on Linux kernel, and also if you look up Wikipedia, you'll see that mission critical systems like they use Linux in the robotics in Mars rover, and also, again, if you look up Wikipedia, you'll see that there are like the top 500 supercomputers in the world run some flavor of Linux. So, and also these days, Linux is growing in its popularity in the desktop market, so making it target for malware attacks. So, which means from an incident response perspective, we need tools to analyze and investigate such malware attacks. So now coming to the types of malware analysis, if you read any articles or the books, they talk about 2 types of analysis. I'm going to cover the 3rd type of analysis as well. So there are 3 types of analysis. There's static analysis, dynamic analysis, and memory analysis. Static analysis is where you're going to analyze the malware sample without actually executing it. So you're trying to determine the characteristics of the malware without even executing. And in case of dynamic analysis, what you're doing is you're executing the malware in a virtualized environment, monitoring its activity to see what it's doing. And then in memory analysis, once you execute the sample, you take the memory image image of the infected system and you analyze for forensic artifacts. So these three types of analysis gives different perspective. This would give a perspective before execution, and this would give dynamic analysis would give the perspective during execution, and memory analysis will give you the post-mortem or the forensic perspective. So these are some of the steps that you might want to do in static analysis. Determine the file type. The reason why you want to determine the file type is because it tells you the architecture the file is targeted towards. For example, if a file type is a PE file, you know the target is Windows. Or if a file type is a ELF file, you know it's a Unix-based systems. And also, you might also want to determine the cryptographic hash, like the MD5 hash or the SHA-1 or the SHA-256 hash, so that you can fingerprint your malware. So the reason is, let's say when you execute a malware, the malware might drop additional components. By fingerprinting your malware, and you can calculate the MD5 hash of the drop component to see if it is the same component it dropped, or it is a different component. If it's the same component, you know it's the same malware. If it's a different one, you know that you have few more samples to analyze. And also another use of cryptographic hash is like to look up services like VirusTotal. You might want to use a cryptographic hash to look up VirusTotal to see how many AV vendors are detecting this, or what is the malware you're dealing with. And remember, we are still in the static analysis where we are not even executing the sample by trying to determine the characteristics of the malware. And also another use of cryptographic hash is like do a Google search or a search on the search engine to see if anybody has already analyzed this sample and has a blog post on it. So these are some of the uses of cryptographic hash. And also you might want to extract the strings from the malware, because strings can contain very interesting information. Like it could have references to IP address, domain names, the URLs, the file names, so which might give an indication of what the capability of the malware is. So, and also you might want to determine the file obfuscation. If a file is obfuscated, the attackers use obfuscations like the packers or the cryptors to thwart your analysis or to thwart your reverse engineering. So you might want to determine if a malware is obfuscated with packers and cryptors. And also submitting to the AV scanner, like I said, so you might want to submit your hash to AV scanner to see what malware you're dealing with. And also fuzzy hash and comparison. Now this fuzzy hash is different from the cryptographic hash. Now cryptographic hash doesn't tell you tell you that the samples are identical. Whereas in fuzzy hash, let's say for example there are two samples of the same malware variants, there are like 1 or 2 bytes that are different. But the cryptographic hash for these two samples would be completely different. But in case of fuzzy hash, what happens is it will tell you how identical whether these samples are identical. It will tell you the percentage similarity so that you get an idea of these two samples belong to the same malware variants, or from a bigger perspective, they belong to the same attacker group. Okay. And then you might also want to determine the ELF characteristics, which will give you the metadata of the ELF file. And also symbols and sections can give you some interesting information. Symbols can give you references to the interesting function name. Now, if you see a function name like Flutter, you know that probably you're dealing with a DDoS malware. And sections can tell you if there is any discrepancy in the ELF file. So for example, if you use packers like UPX, it will remove the section header completely. So by looking at the section, if you don't see any sections in a ELF file, it's suspicious. Okay, and also you might want to disassemble the sample to understand the capabilities of the malware. So in dynamic analysis, like I said, you will be executing and monitoring its activity. So you want to execute. While you're executing, you might want to monitor its file system activity, how it's interacting with the file system. Is it creating additional process? Is it connecting to the network? So these are some of the things that you'll be determining using dynamic analysis. You might also want to do system call tracing to see all the things that malware is doing. And next is, once you execute the sample, you take the memory image. You analyze the memory image for forensic artifacts, so it can give you very interesting information. When I show you the demo, it will be clear. But these are some of the information that you can find. You can determine the list of running process on the system. You can determine the list of network connections, the shared objects, the kernel modules loaded by the kernel modules loaded, the code injection, the hooking, and so on. So when I show you the demo, it will be clear. So now we talked about static, dynamic, and memory analysis. So what I did was I wrote a tool to automate the static, dynamic, and memory analysis, which I call it Limon. So it's a sandbox for analyzing Linux malwares. It developed as a research project because I was good at Windows malware analysis, but I wanted to learn Linux malware analysis. So I looked for some of the sandbox for Linux. I couldn't find anything that did what I wanted it to do. So I wrote my own sandbox to automate it. It's written in Python, and it uses various open source tools to perform the static, dynamic, and memory analysis. So this is the working of Limon. So what it does is it takes the malware sample as input. So then it does static analysis, that is analyzing without executing it. Then it transfers the malware to the virtualized environment, executes it, monitors its activity, then it takes the memory image and does memory analysis and stores the reports, stores it in a report file. So these are some of the tools that are used by Limon. It uses Yara Python for packer detection. So you can write if you know Yara, you can write your own signatures for packers, or you can write signatures for determine the capability of the malware. To do that, it uses Yara Python, and it uses VirusTotal public API to submit to search the hash on VirusTotal to see how many AV vendors are detecting it. And for fuzzy hash, it uses SSDeep, and it uses strings utility to extract the Unicode and the ASCII strings from the malware. And then it uses LDD to display all the shared objects that the malware relies on. And then it uses readelf for displaying the ELF characteristics, the metadata of the ELF file. initsim basically to simulate all the services. So this is useful while, let's say if a malware is trying to download a file from xyz.com, a.exe from xyz.com, first thing it has to do is to resolve the domain. Right? So, but at the same time, let's say you don't want to allow the malware to connect to the actual command and control server. What you do is you fake services like DNS, HTTP, SMTP, and all those services so that you can give fake response to the malware. That way you can determine what the malware is doing while it's running. And then it uses TCP dump for capturing the packet and volatility memory forensic framework for doing the memory forensics. And strace and sysdig for basically doing the dynamic analysis. So while it's executing, it traces the system calls to see what the malware is doing. And these are the supported file types. So if you know Linux, so it need not be always ELF file that is malicious. It can come as a Perl script. It can come as the malware can come as a PHP dropper. It can come as a Python script. So basically, these are some of the supported file types, and there is also support for the loadable kernel modules. Let's say you want to analyze the kernel objects, so you can do that. And these are some of the general features of Limon. So it can run in the sandbox mode, meaning, like I said, it simulates all the services when it's running in the sandbox mode. The idea is not to allow the malware to connect to the actual command and control server, but try to determine as much as try to determine what the malware does just by simulating the services. And it can run in the internet mode. Sometimes you might want to allow the malware to connect to the actual command and control server. Let's say, for example, if a malware is downloading additional component, you might want to allow it to connect to the actual command and control server to see what it does after downloading the sample. So that's why that's why the internet mode. And like I said, if you're running in sandbox mode, it simulates all the services, and it also has an option to run for a specified time. So let's say if a malware sleeps for like 60 seconds, you might want to run it for like 120 seconds to determine its behavior. So that's where this time option helps. And also it captures the desktop screenshot and reports on the malware behavior. These are some of the static analysis features that we talked about. So it determines the file type, file size, MD5 hash, fuzzy hash. And also one more thing it does is, once it determines the fuzzy hash, it compares the fuzzy hash of the sample with the fuzzy hash of the previously submitted samples. It keeps a master list. So the idea is so that when you submit a sample, it compares with that list and tells you if there is a percentage similarity. That way you can know that this malware sample is a variant of the previously analyzed samples. And also displays the ELF characteristics, extracts strings, determine the packers using Yara rules. And also it determines capabilities like the IRC capabilities and other capabilities using Yara rules. And these are some of the things that we already talked about. So in dynamic analysis, it gives you different options. So basically, to do dynamic analysis, it relies on two tools, strace and sysdig, this or that, strace or sysdig. In strace, if you are running through strace, there are two options. One is filtered call trace and unfiltered call trace. The default option is filtered call trace using strace. So the reason is because it only monitors the specific system calls which is commonly used by the malwares. The idea is so that it's less noisy. So you don't have to look at like 1,000 lines of data to determine what the malware is doing. But let's say you want unfiltered call trace, you want more verbose results, you can choose that option, which is unfiltered call trace, which runs through sysdig and it monitors all the system calls. And then the same options using sysdig. You can use filtered system monitoring to monitor only specific calls, or you can use unfiltered system monitoring to monitor all the system calls. And again, once it does, it displays the DNS summary, shows the TCP conversation, it stores the packet captures and other artifacts for later analysis. When I show the demo again, it will be clear. So and memory analysis, these are some of the memory analysis features. There are a lot of features. The Limon relies on Volatility Advanced Memory Forensic Framework. So basically, I've used almost all the plugins of Volatility. So basically, it offers a lot of capabilities. Now, this is useful if you're dealing with malwares which are rootkits, or when you're dealing with rootkits or malwares that have stealth capabilities. So basically, it allows you to list process with arguments, display network connections, shows hidden kernel modules, hidden shared libraries, code injection, hooking, different types of hooking, and so on. So basically, there are a lot of things here. So just to show you that how Limon works, and also to show you the how Linux malware works. So I have a demo. So the first demo is the analysis of a Linux malware called Tsunami, so which is a DDoS malware. Let me bring up the video demo and show you the stuff. Okay, so these are the options in Limon. As you can see here, it supports various file types, Perl, Python, PHP shell, and stuff like that. And also this -c like I said, the default option is to use the filtered call trace using sysdig. In case you want unfiltered call trace, you can use this option here, -c, and -e using sysdig, and -E again using sysdig, both filtered and unfiltered system monitoring. And also with -m option, you can tell Limon to perform memory analysis. And also with with capital M, it is verbose memory analysis, because there are some plugins in Volatility which are slow, which detects hooking capabilities. So you can use -m, but it'll take some time to run. Okay, just to show you. What I'm doing right now is I'm giving this malware sample to Limon. I'm asking it to run for 40 seconds and also asking it to do memory analysis here. So when I play the video, you will see a lot of things happening on the screen. So what Limon is doing is it's going to do the static analysis. It's going to pop up the VM and transfers the file to the VM, executes the malware sample in the VM, monitor its activities, and then suspends the VM and takes the memory image and does memory analysis. And once the same thing that you see in the screen is also reported back in a report file. So you can ignore what's happening on the screen. We'll look at the same thing in the reports file. So you see that, as you can see here, it started doing a static analysis. And you'll see that when I play the video, it popped up the VM. Okay, and also it is simulating all the services. Like I said, because we are running in the sandbox mode, it is simulating all the services like DNS, IRC, all those services, so that it can give fake response to the malware. Okay. And you see now it is executing the file for 40 seconds. After executing the file for 40 seconds, it is also running the monitoring tools. You'll see that it will suspend the VM. As you can see, it suspended the VM. Now suspending the VM creates a memory image, which is the memory image of the infected machine. Now it takes the memory image and does memory analysis using Volatility Advanced Memory Forensic Framework. So once it is done, it stores the results in this directory. So let's go to that directory and see what we can find. So this is the report file. It stores in a text file, and also you see that it stored other artifacts like the packet capture. So let's look at the report file first. So these are the static analysis results. Okay. As you can see here, the file type is a 32-bit ELF executable file. So you know the target is Linux. Okay. Also, you see that it is dynamically linked, meaning it relies on some of the shared libraries. And also, it is not stripped, meaning the symbols are not stripped, which means looking at the symbol table can give you references to some interesting function names and the variable names. Okay, so we'll see that in some time. Also, you see that it calculated the file size, MD5, and the fuzzy hash here, the SSDeep hash. And also, it determined the ELF characteristics here. And you also see that it did an SSDeep comparison, and you see that there is an 100% match with a file that was previously submitted to Limon. So which means this is the same sample that was analyzed before. Okay. And then you can see that it has extracted the strings. The strings are stored in a separate file, which we'll see in some time. So it is stored in a separate text file, strings ASCII and strings Unicode. Okay, we'll come to that. And also you see that it tried to determine the packers, it's not tagged. And also it uses Yara rules to determine the capabilities of the malware. In this case, I had written signatures to determine if it has got IRC capability. It hit that signature. It looks like we are dealing with an IRC bot, but we again need to confirm that in the dynamic analysis. Okay, so also you see that the VirusTotal results here shows that we are dealing with a sample called, we are dealing with a malware sample called Tsunami. Okay. And also it's displaying the dependencies, the program header, the section header, and the symbol information here. If you remember, the symbols were not stripped. So let's look at the symbols and see if we can find anything interesting here. You see here it has references to symbols like connect, all the connect, receive, listen, socket. So this tells you that the malware has some kind of network capability because it has references to network related system calls. Okay. Also, you see there is references to objects like flooders. Now, if you see this, probably we are dealing with a DDoS malware, right? So, and then you see that there are references to functions like getSpoofs. Probably it has some kind of spoofing capabilities. Okay, so now that was static analysis results. Let's look at the dynamic analysis results and see what the malware does. As you can see here, the malware sample, the one which I submitted was executed successfully, and the process ID is 2673. Okay. And you see that here, the malware once executed, it calls a clone system call to create a child process whose process ID is now 2674. Okay, so now you know that once executed, the malware creates a child process, and then you see that the child process actually is trying to open a file which doesn't exist on the sandbox, which is this file user/dig/words. So looking at the name of the file, it looks like it's some kind of dictionary file that it will use for password cracking functionality. Okay, so now we know that once executed, the malware creates a child process, and this child process is trying to read a file which looks like a dictionary file which has some kind of password cracking functionality. So once that is done, you see that it creates a socket, so whose file descriptor is 3 here. And once it creates a socket, you can see that it is connecting to that socket, and it is going to connect to this IP address here. So which is the command and control server IP address, that is 80.243.54.131, and this is the port that it will connect on. So that is 5566. Okay, and once it connects, you see that it is writing to the socket. And looking at the content, you see that it looks like some kind of IRC content. So if you remember, the Yara rule hit on a IRC signature. So this looks like it is an IRC bot. Okay, so this is a TCP conversations. This is a TCP conversation caught during the execution of the sample. You see that it indeed this is the infected machine where I executed the sample. And it indeed connected to this command and control server, and you see it is connecting on port 5566. The same thing that we determined in dynamic analysis. Now what I'm doing is, the Limon also stores the packet capture of the session. So I'm opening the packet capture to show you the pack. So you see that here, it is connecting to that IP address on port 5566, and you see the packet. If you look at the TCP stream, you see that it's an IRC. It's IRC communication. So this is an IRC bot. What it does is it connects to the IRC channel. It takes command from the attacker, and based on the command, it will perform action based on the command received. So next, what I'm showing you is, if you remember, the strings were extracted and stored in a separate file. Let me show you the strings. As you can see, there are references to the system calls here. And also extracting the string shows that there is a reference to the command and control server here. Because this malware is not obfuscated, extracting the strings is enough to, can give you some very interesting information. In this case, it has references to this IP address where it connected. If you remember, we saw that while we did the dynamic analysis. It has references to this command and control server IP address. And also it has references to that, if you remember that dictionary file that it was trying to read, it has references to the dictionary file. And also you see that it has references to the IRC and the HTTP related commands that the malware takes. Okay. Also you see references to strings like wrong password, password correct. So if you remember, it was trying to read a dictionary file, and you see there is strings like wrong password, password correct. So which confirms that probably the malware has some kind of password cracking capability. And also you see these are all the commands that it receives from the attacker. And also there are some descriptions of these commands. Like you see that this is an advanced SYN floodder. There is this advanced SYN floodder, UDP floodder. It has like different capabilities here. Kills the client, downloads a file off the web and save it onto the disk. So as you can see, there are a lot of capabilities of this particular malware here. Just by extracting the strings, we are able to determine a lot of things here. Also, you see strings like spoofs, etc., kill all. So now going back to the results, and let's look at the memory analysis results. So in this case, the memory analysis result won't give anything different because the malware is not stealth. But just to show you that, but this memory analysis can give you a post-mortem perspective. This is after infection. Okay, so looking at the memory analysis results, I'm listing the process using the Volatility's PS list plugin. So you see that the process is actually executing on the system. That is the sample that we executed. You see that it is executing with the process ID 2674. And also looking at the process tree also shows that the process is actually is running on the system. And displaying the network connections shows that, again, this is from the memory. So we are dumping the memory and extracting these artifacts from the memory. Okay. So as you can see here, there is a communication to the command and control server on port 5566, but it also shows you which process was doing the communication. As you can see here, it is the process the file that we executed. Okay, so that's the end of the first demo. So the idea of this demo is to show you how Limon works, and this was a simple malware sample. So what I'll do is okay, so the next demo is of a malware sample called Mayhem. So the idea is to show you that it's not always ELF file. Okay, so this is a PHP dropper. So let me show you how to analyze this PHP dropper using Limon. And let's try to understand what the malware does. Oops. As you can see, that's the option, Limon option. So what I'm saying is, I'm telling Limon that with -z option, that this is a PHP script, so that it can run it with the PHP interpreter and then monitor its activity. So I'm giving this PHP script here, which is may.php, and I'm asking it to run for 25 seconds, and I'm also asking it to do the memory analysis. Now, once I play the video, you'll see that it started doing the static analysis, and then it will pop up the VM, transfer this file to the VM, run it with the PHP interpreter, monitor its activity, suspends the VM, take the memory image, and does the analysis. As you can see here, once it finished analysis, it stores the reports in this directory. Again, let's go to the reports directory and see what it does. This is the static analysis results. As you can see, the file type here is a PHP script. And you see that the virus total has very less detections. So there are like 1 or 2 AV vendors are detecting this as malicious. And let's look at the dynamic analysis results. If you see here, the file was successfully executed using the PHP interpreter. Okay, so with the process ID 2675. So after it executes the PHP, what's happening here is this PHP is trying to kill all instances of a host process. So host is a legitimate process on a Linux machine. It is trying to kill all instances of host process first. And then another interesting thing that it does is basically it is trying to create a shared object, which is root/cache.so. So it is trying to create a cache shared object and writing the ELF content to it. So basically what it's doing is it's dropping a shared object. Shared object is equivalent to DLLs on Windows. Okay, so basically it is dropping a shared object, and then another thing it does is it writes a shell script. It creates a shell script which is 1.sh, and then writes this content into the shell script. It's not executed yet, it is just writing this content into the shell script. So far, what it did was, once you ran it through the PHP interpreter, it dropped the shared object, it created a shell script, it is writing this content to the shell script. So what this content is that it is checking if the cache.so is present. If it is present, kill all instances of the host process. And also using the export command, it is setting an environment variable. You see here export. And also this is interesting here, it is setting an environment variable called ld_preload. So ld_preload is an environment variable whose value is the path to the shared object. Okay, so in this case the shared object is the one which the malware dropped. I'll come to that. And then once it sets that environment variable, what it is doing is it is running the host process here. So basically it invokes the host process, and then it is unsetting the environment variable. So what exactly is happening here is that, like I said, ld_preload is an environment variable whose value is the path to the shared object. So by doing this technique is called ld_preload technique. So what the malware is doing is, by adding this path to the shared object to the ld_preload variable, so whenever a process gets created, that is in this case the host process, what happens is the cache.eso is the first shared object to get loaded. Okay, so in this case what the malware is doing is it is implementing an exit function inside the cache.so. Exit is a legitimate function basically, so which is also implemented in a standard library. So in this case it's implementing a malicious exit function. So what happens when the host process is invoked, it displays the help option and it exits, which means it has to call the exit function. So in this case, as a result of this ld_preload technique, what it's doing is it's calling the exit function which is implemented in this malicious shared object which the malware dropped, rather than the actual exit function in the standard library. Now as a result of that, the control is redirected to the exit function which is implemented in the cache.so. Now this exit function is a malicious function. So it will do all its malicious activity and then call the actual exit function in the standard library. That way, the application won't know. It won't know that anything went wrong. So in this case, what the malicious exit function is doing is, it is actually collecting the system info. When the host process calls exit, it calls into exit in the cache.so file. This is the malicious function. What it's doing, it is collecting the system information, sending it to the attacker, and then calling the actual exit function in the standard library. So basically, by using the ld_preload technique, the malware made the legitimate process, which is the host process, to call a malicious exit function and then does it malicious activity. So when you're doing live forensics, you will see that the host process is doing the malicious activity. But the reason why host process is doing the malicious activity is due to this ld_preload technique, because of which it got the cache.so got loaded into the address space of host process. Okay, so this is the content that it wrote to the shell script. Okay, so next what it is doing is so this is how it is executing that shell script. So far you know that it dropped the shared object, it dropped the shell script, it wrote that content into the shell script, and this is how it is executing the shell script. It is executing the shell script using the command. It is saying execute this file now. So basically what happens is, now the shell script executes. As a result of shell script getting executed, all those ld_preload attack starts happening. So then you see that this is the network activity. You see that as a result of calling the malicious exit function, it makes a DNS query to this domain here. So hppchange.com, which is the command and control server, which resolves to this IP address here. Once it resolves the IP address, you see that it is connecting to that IP address on port 80. So it looks like it's doing an HTTP communication. So let's look at the packet capture. You see that it is making a DNS query to that domain, hthpchange.com, which again resolved to that IP address, and there is a port communication on port 80. This is the pattern with which it is communicating. As you can see here, it is communicating to the domain, and this is the part, it is making a post request at loudtext/tector.php. And also notice the hard-coded pragma here. So this is a hard-coded pragma that is 1337, so which you can use it as an indicator to detect this malware sample. And also you see that it is sending a comma-separated values here, r comma something. If you see here, it is sending the system information to the attacker here. Okay, so just to show you, if it's not visible. So it's saying the user is root, Linux, Ubuntu, whatever, the architecture of the Linux. Okay, so this is the first communication of the malware. So once it infects the system, it talks to the command and control server and sends this information. This is to let the attacker know that the shared object was successfully loaded. Later, the attacker can interact with the malware and then issue various other commands. Going back to the memory analysis results, so if the LD preload technique worked, if you remember, the host process has to be running, right? Because in the shell script, it invoked the host process. So listing the process from the memory, you see that the host process is actually running here on the system, right? With the process ID 2690. And also extracting the environment variables from the memory. So these are the environment variables of the host process, which is 2690. You see that the LD preload variable is actually set here, and the value of that variable is the path to that shared object that the malware dropped. Okay, if you remember, this is memory analysis. Okay, we are extracting the memory and doing the analysis. That's one thing. So if the LD preload worked properly, then the host process should load this cache.so file, right? So listing the libraries, the shared objects loaded by the host, you see that it loads all other shared objects. Also, you will see that it loaded the cache.so file here. The host process here, which is the 2690, loaded this cache.so. So the reason it loaded is because of that LD preload technique, because the malware added that the path to the shared object in the LD preload variable. As a result of that, this shared object got preloaded, which is a malicious shared object. So now what I'm doing is, Limon actually does static analysis, dynamic analysis, and memory analysis. As a result of that, it suspends the VM. So which means there is a memory image. There is a memory image of the infected machine. So I'm going to take that memory image of the infected machine here. I'm just going to show you that I'm going to do a little bit of memory forensics here to show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump that cache.so, which was loaded by the host process, and show you that it is malicious. So what I'm doing is I'm using volatility framework to do the memory forensics. I'm using the library dump plugin, so using which you can dump the shared object from the memory. I'm telling it to dump from the process ID 2690, which is the host process. I'm telling dump this shared object that is loaded into the address space of host process, and I'm giving it the base address where this shared object is loaded here, in this case here. And I'm asking it to dump to this directory called dump. So now what happens is that it dumps the cache.so from the address space of host process. Okay, so which is this. Now just to show you that, running the file command, you see that it is actually ELF64-bit shared object. So shared object is the shared library. Okay, so then I'm extracting the strings from that shared object to see if we can find any interesting strings there. Extracting the strings, you see that there is reference to this string here, which is the command and control server, which we saw in the packet capture. If you remember, If you remember, we dumped this cache.so from the memory of the host process, and we are looking at the strings, and you see that the strings show reference to the command and control server IP address and the pattern that we saw in the packet capture. So that confirms that it is not the host process that is doing the malicious activity. It is as a result of the LD preload technique, this shared object got loaded, which is the malicious shared object. This is where all these functions are implemented. And also you see this comma separated values. If you remember that r comma something, the format string, this gets populated during the runtime, which is how it is sending the system information to the attacker. And also you see references to pragma here, 1337. If you remember, this was a hard-coded pragma. Okay. And also you see references to this. So this is, if you remember, if you see this user bin uname, so this is how it is collecting the system information. When the malicious exit function get called, this is how it is running this command to get the system information and then sending it to the attacker. Okay. Also, one more thing that I want to show you is just to show you that the dump component is actually malicious. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit that cache.so that was dumped from the memory and submit it to VirusTotal to show you that it is malicious. So once I submit to VirusTotal, you see that there are 8 detections. 8 out of 55 AV vendors detect this as malicious, and you see that it's detected as Linux backdoor, right? Just to show you that this is the cache.so that we dumped from the host process. As you can see, this confirms that that is malicious. And now we were able to dump it from the memory. Now you have a sample that you can run it. You can reverse engineer it, or you can run it in a sandbox, or you can run a AV scan against it, or Yara signatures against it. So that's the thing. And then, so that's about the second demo. Again, the idea of this demo was to show again the capability of Limon, and also to show you that it's not always ELF file. It can come as different files like Perl. It can be a Perl dropper. It can be a PHP dropper, or it can come as a Python script. The third demo is of a rootkit sample. So this is slightly advanced. So just wanted to cover it, so it won't take much time. So this is a rootkit called Sutrusu rootkit. So this is not a real life malware. This is a proof of concept rootkit. So this is publicly available. So what you can do is you can compile it to a kernel object, and then you can run it. So but it uses a lot of stealth techniques. Okay, so that should give an idea of the stealth techniques of the rootkits that are used in the wild. Okay, so let's analyze this rootkit using Limon and see what we can find. So this is a good proof of concept rootkits to understand how the Linux rootkits work. So it does a lot of hooking. It hides a lot of things. The third demo is, so what I'm telling Limon is, I'm telling that with -k, I'm telling that this is a loadable kernel module. So that's the .ko with the .ko extension. So I've compiled this. It's a C code. The Sutrusu rootkit is a C code. You can compile it on your kernel and then analyze this malware. So that's what I'm doing here. So Sutrusu.ko is the malicious module here. So what I'm telling is, I'm telling it to load this kernel module on the system and analyze it for 30 seconds and also do memory analysis. So as you know, it will perform the static analysis. It will pop up the VM, transfer the file, load the kernel module on the system, and then it suspends the VM and it does memory analysis using Volatility Advanced Memory Forensic Framework. And then it stores the results in this directory here. Okay, so let's go to the results directory. This is the static analysis. As you can see, this is the ELF64 relocatable file. Oops. Also looking at the symbol information, you see that it has references to files like keylogger.c. So probably it has some kind of keylogging capabilities. And also you see references to functions like hide TCP port. So probably it hides some kind, it hides the TCP connections, okay? Or it might do the hooking and make the legitimate function point to this function. You see that there are reference to object like hook symbols. Probably it's going to hook the symbols. Let's look at the there's nothing much in the dynamic analysis, but just to show you that the Limon used INS mod. So if you know INS mod is the it comes with it is present in Linux, so you can use INS mod to load a kernel module. So it used INS mod to load the Sutrusu kernel module. Okay. As you can see, it was successfully loaded. And then let's look at the memory analysis results. So this is where memory analysis, integrating memory analysis into your sandbox helps, because when you're dealing with rootkits and stealth malwares, the memory forensics can help you understand the capabilities of the malware. Okay. So what I'm showing here is the kernel list of kernel modules. So this is the same output that you'll see when you execute lsmod command inside Linux. So if you look at the kernel modules, you'll see that the Sutrusu kernel module is not present in the module list. So the reason is because Linux keeps track of active modules as a linked list. So in this case, the Sutrusu rootkit was unlinked itself from the list to hide itself. So if you're running live forensic tools like lsmod, this is what you will see. You will not see the presence of the Sutrusu kernel module here. Okay. Also, Linux also keeps track of the active modules basically in two places. One is proc modules, which lsmod relies on, and there is also a file system called sysfs file system. Inside sysfs file system, there is a directory created for each active module, which contains information about the name of the kernel module, the sections, and so on. So what you can do is, if you want to detect a hidden kernel module, you can compare the list from the module list with the list from the sysfs and look for discrepancy. In this case, what happened is it unlinked itself from the module list. It also hid itself from the sysfs list. Okay. So there is another method by which you can detect hidden modules. So volatility uses volatility has a plugin. What it does is it extracts the kernel module from the memory. Okay, so and then it compares with the module list and the sysfs list and reports if there is any discrepancy. In this case, it uses carving basically. So in this case, you see that after carving, you see that it found a driver which is not present in the module list and the sysfs list. So which means this kernel module is hidden from the module list, and it also is hidden from the sysfs file system. Okay, but volatility was able to determine this using the carving technique. So this confirms that the driver, once installed, will hide itself from the live forensic tools. Just to show you that, again, I'm showing the kernel module to show you that the Sutrusu module is not present in the module list and in the sysfs list. Also, another thing that the module did was it set up the keyboard notifiers. Okay, so Linux enables you to receive a callback notification whenever a key is pressed. Okay, so this is basically for legitimate purpose like hotkey implementations. But the malwares can also make use of this feature. So in this case, the Sutrusu rootkit installed the kernel module, and it set the keyboard notifiers. Okay, so that whenever a key is pressed, a callback function is called within the Sutrusu's kernel module. Now this function can read all your keystrokes, and it can log it to a file or send it over the network. That way it can steal all your keystrokes by setting up the keyboard notifiers. That's exactly what it's doing. This is the address where the callback function is. So now you know that the Sutrusu rootkit can steal your keystrokes, and again, if you reverse engineer the function, you probably get an idea what the rootkit is doing. In this case, Sutrusu is basically writing to the kernel buffer and then writing it to the file. Okay, so in reality, a rootkit can use this technique to steal your keystrokes, and they can send it over the network. Also, another thing the rootkit is doing is inline kernel hooks. So the inline kernel hooks is a technique where the malware can modify several instructions in the function. So basically, using jump, call, or ret instructions. So the idea is to redirect the control flow to a function in the malicious module. So that way, if any application that is relying on the system call would go to the malicious function, which can then add, delete, modify, or intercept any data related to that system call. In this case, what it is doing is, you see that it is hooking the read dir function of the proc file system. Now, if you know, the kernel exports a lot of interesting information to the user land through the proc file system. Like you have process-related information in the proc file system. Proc slash, there is a per process directory for each process in the proc file system. There is modules information in the proc file system. And there is network-related information in the proc file system. So basically, the tools like PS, Netstat, LSORF, they all rely on reading these directories. So which means they have to call this read dir system call. By hooking the system call, what the malware is doing is, whenever these tools like PS, Netstat calls read dir function, this is being redirected to a malicious function here, which is here, jump, there is a jump to this function. Now this malicious function can intercept and modify any data it wants. For example, let's say if you're running a PS tool, it is reading a directory which is getting transferred here, and the return value of the PS, again, comes to this function here. Now this guy can delete any process that he wants to delete and return the results back to the PS process. Now, the PS will show all the process except the rootkit process because of this hooking. So that way it can hide the network activity as well. So the hooking the read dir of proc function, it can hide from various tools like the PS, like I said, PS, LSMod, Netstat, and so on. So it can hide a lot of information. And this is where the hooking function is. Also, another thing you see here is, here, it also hooks the TCP operation sequence operation handlers. Now it is hooking this show function. So basically, the kernel actually exports the data to the user land, like I said, right? So it uses sequence operation handlers to do that. So by hooking this sequence operation handlers, like the show in this case, it is responsible for showing the information of a record, like the network connection. By hooking this show information and redirecting to the malicious function, the malware can hide the network connections from the live forensic tools. Okay, so the malware, when you're running Netstat, it will show all the network connections except the ones that the rootkit wants to hide, right? So with this, I've concluded demo. As you can see, there are different types of malwares. Each malware has different capabilities. So we looked at 3 different types of malwares. But like I said, integrating memory analysis into a sandbox is helpful to get an idea of what the malware is doing post-infection. Okay, so let's go back to the slides here. Okay, so I've almost come to the end of the presentation. So this is the key takeaways from the presentation. Like I said, the Linux is growing in its popularity, so many devices are using Linux, and also because of its open source nature, there are a lot of devices that are using Linux, making it target for malware attacks. So which means from an incident response perspective and from a security research perspective, we need tools to analyze Linux malwares, right? So these are some of the references. So once the slide is on the Black Hat site, you can go through that. So with that, I come to the end of the presentations, and I can take any questions if you have. No questions? Yeah.
Does Limon have any capabilities to avoid EM detection?
No. So in that case, you might want to reverse engineer. Probably I might work on that in future, but you might want to reverse engineer the sample, try to understand how it is detecting the sample and probably patch it, or reverse the condition and then run through it, or the easiest would be run it in a physical machine again. Yeah, so any other questions? Yes.
When you're analyzing the file, when you don't have the technical, you
Oh, it relies on the magic header. The ELF file has this magic header, right? The file utility relies on that magic header. So if you see the ELF file, it starts with /7f ELF. The first 4 bytes is that of a ELF file. And then comes the, whether it's the file is a 64-bit file or a 32-bit file, then the next byte tells you whether it's a little endian format or a big endian format. So there is this like 7 byte of ELF file header. It recognizes, like in case of the Windows executable, there is this the MZ header. The same way, Linux file also has this magic header that can be used to recognize the file type of the system, irrespective of the extension. Does it make sense? Okay. So any other questions? Okay, so if there are no questions, then I would, before I conclude, I just want to tell you that, so the Limon is will be available on the Black Hat site. And also, if you, it's open source, like I said, so it's under GNU GPL version 3 license. Okay, so if you want to use Linux, you can use Linux. It's open source. It will be available on the Black Hat site. Also, one more thing that I want to do is once I go back to make a setup documentation. So what I'll do is once I make a setup documentation, I will be posting on this blog site so that you can set up that environment and use Limon to analyze Linux malwares. And also, if you have any feedbacks or questions, feel free to send me an email or the email that I mentioned at the start of the presentation. Use Limon and let me know if you have any feedbacks, or if you want to write your own plugins, feel free to write it and please share it with the community. I hope you like the presentation. With this, I conclude my presentation. Have a nice day, guys.